Welcome back to another day of training. It's been a couple weeks since I did one of these. Had a little hiatus just because training was a little weird and had a little bit of kind of a moment last week where I was just kind of like, what the hell am I doing? Was trying to figure out kind of what direction I wanted my training to take at the moment. And I just kind of had to sit down, um, grab my notebook, and just go through what I wanted out of this off season. So I've made myself some new goals. I feel like I have a good direction now. I've mapped out kind of a general progression scheme, and part of that progression scheme involves some farmer carries. Um, but I wanted to kind of talk about how I am going to be structuring the kind of main compound movements, as well as the accessory movements, because I'm going to be structuring them differently. Um, with the off season, there is no need to peak. So with that in mind, the sort of periodization that I use for my compound lifts is going to be different than my accessories. Usually when I'm in a prep, I will kind of funnel everything up to that peak meet day as far as tapering and peaking goes. My accessories will complement my compounds as far as fatigue goes. However, in this case, I don't really have to worry about that. So I kind of have them segmented. So they're almost separate progressions. So my compound movements have their own sort of progressions, and my deadlift progression, my squat progression, and my bench progressions all look different. Um, Deadlift, I'm sort of going back and forth between with carries. Squats, I'm doing a little bit more of a wave format because that's worked pretty well in the past. And bench, I'm just doing a little bit more of a kind of 4 weeks on, 1 week off. However, that none of those carry into accessories. So, for example, if I hit a day where I'm taking a kind of deload with the weight on my compounds, my accessories don't necessarily follow suit. So the accessories, as soon as I stop seeing progression on either mode, so either my compound or my accessory, that is when I'll pull back for the week. However, I'm anticipating those not always correlating. They might correlate, but in the case that they don't, it doesn't really matter. So I also progress them differently. So my compounds, I obviously progress with weight versus accessories are kind of depends on the accessory. So for example, something like the single arm pull downs that I was doing earlier, I probably won't progress weight wise. I'll probably just progress those either adding more sets, reducing my rest time, or adding reps. And that kind of goes for a lot of my accessories, but it also depends on the accessory, right? Like it depends what I'm using the accessory for. And I think that's an important part of your off season is kind of understanding what you're using each lift for. So in this session, for example, my farmer carry, that's just a compound I want to work on, right? Those barbell rows are essentially to get me that posterior loading stimulus as well as a row that's more specific to the positioning of a deadlift. So that is one that I'm going to progress with weight, because that is kind of the more direct carryover towards the deadlift versus something like those underhand pull downs with the single arm. That's a focus on the stretch, focus on the eccentric. That is purely kind of a hypertrophy movement. So that is one that I'm going to progress, like I said earlier. And then you have movements like these, the side bends with the dumbbell, the glute bridges, and then after this, I'm going to be doing some planks. So I did all these as a giant set at the end of the lift. These are very specific towards sort of more weaknesses, right? So the side bends, I've had some flare-ups with the back. So I really like to get some unilateral work in, kind of target the individual glute, the individual QLs, and really just strengthen everything around my spine. The glute bridges to really focus on kind of the neurological aspect, firing my glutes because that's a big weakness of mine, and the plank, a little bit of core, nothing too crazy. I'm not great at planks, but this is something that you kind of want to work on. So these probably won't really progress very much. I might progress the reps a little bit, but this is mostly just to get a little bit of extra volume in. So that's kind of the basics of how I'm separating things this training block.